Superman was born on Krypton, but he was forged in the war-torn battlefields of Europe, the Depression-era streets of Cleveland, and the vivid imaginations of two outcast teenagers in search of truth, justice, and the American way. Superman was more than Metropolis's protector. He helped define what it meant to be an American and pave the way for superheroes to take over the world. In the 1930s, the world was gripped by war, poverty, and political chaos driven by a global economic depression. In the United States, people fought for survival as banks failed, families starved, and the American dream withered away. In Europe, fascist leaders like Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini seized power and enslaved once free nations. But from the ashes of destruction, a new hero arose. He existed only on paper, but he was real in the imaginations of millions of fans and inspired a nation desperate for hope. The American comic book industry was built by those shut out everywhere else. If you were Black, Latino, gay, Jewish, or an immigrant, the doors to the nation's top art schools, galleries, museums, and publishers were often closed. Because comic books were dismissed as cheap and disposable, they became one of the only places where anyone could break in. It didn't matter where you came from, what you looked like, or what you believed. If you could tell a story people wanted to read, you were in. Comic books quickly became one of the most popular art forms in America, selling millions of copies every month. During a wave of immigration, new Americans found the bold images and simple stories easy to understand. As comic publishers and creators gained wealth and influence, the establishment turned against them. Political and religious authorities worked together to pass laws banning or restricting comic books for kids. They would even sponsor mass burnings where people threw stacks of comics into bonfires. There was a war on comics and the people who created them, and if they were going to survive in the 20th century, they needed a hero to save them. Jerry Siegel was no one's idea of a hero. He was poor, overweight, and a painfully shy teenager in Cleveland, Ohio. At school, boys bullied him, girls ignored him, and his teachers failed him. The real world was cruel, so he retreated into fantasy. He would cut school and spend long hours reading adventure books like Tarzan and Zorro at the library. Jerry loved heroes because they were everything he wasn't. Brave, handsome, strong, and unafraid of the world, they lived the life he wanted for himself. In high school, Jerry met Joe Shuster, an outcast just like him. Joe was barely 5 feet tall, had thick glasses, and came from a family so poor, his shoes were full of holes. He was a gifted artist, but they couldn't afford drawing paper, so Joe sketched on scraps of wallpaper and butcher paper, anything he could find. Jerry and Joe became fast friends. Both were awkward, unpopular, and the sons of Jewish immigrants who had fled Europe to escape anti-Semitism. Like every teenager, they wanted to get the girl, make the team, and maybe have a little money to enjoy life. But more than anything, they just wanted to belong. They dreamed of being heroes, and the only place that dream could come true was on the pages of the comics they created together. The one person who always believed in Jerry's dreams was his father, Mitchell. He encouraged Jerry to write, to create, and to imagine a better world. He never made him feel like an outcast. So when Jerry came home from school one day and found out his father had been murdered during a robbery, his world collapsed. Losing the person who loved him the most shattered Jerry and drove him deeper into the only place that still made sense, the world of fantasy. When he finally returned to making comics, he created an entirely new character, one with incredible superpowers that would change the world forever. He named him Superman. In 1933, Jerry and Joe created a comic called The Reign of Superman. Reign told the story of a scientist who injects a man named Bill Dunn with a serum that gives him incredible psychic powers. This Superman uses his abilities for evil and becomes a villain intent on controlling the world. But Jerry and Joe didn't want to write about a bad guy, so they continued to develop the character. They were inspired by classic heroes like John Carter of Mars and Hugo Danner, a hero known as the Gladiator. But the biggest influence was Doc Savage, also known as the Man of Bronze. He had super strength, genius-level intelligence, and a code of honor. He didn't kill, he stood for justice. and when he needed peace, he retreated to his Arctic hideout, his fortress of solitude. Savage also had a secret alter ego, whose first name was Clark. After the reign of Superman, Jerry and Joe recreated their character as a superpowered scientist on a future version of a dying Earth who used a time machine to send himself into the past, where he became a crime fighter with no secret identity. In another version, the scientist sends his only son back, where he is discovered in an Iowa cornfield and raised by farmers, Sam and Molly Kent. But Jerry knew the character still wasn't right. While sweating in his room on a hot summer night, he realized the origin story wasn't super enough. He didn't want to write just another comic about a man with incredible strength. He wanted to tell an even more extraordinary story. The tale of a fallen god who comes to Earth to protect the innocent. That was the moment he invented Krypton and decided that Superman was an alien sent from another planet. He named him Kal-El, similar to the Hebrew word for the voice of God. Finally, he decided that Superman needed an alter ego and created Clark Kent, a reporter who could investigate crimes that Superman would later solve. Once Jerry created the character, Joe gave him his signature style. He started with a tight-fitting uniform to showcase his powerful physique. Next, he added the bright red, yellow, and blue color scheme to make him look like he was exploding off the page. Superman's red cape gave him a sense of motion and evoked the feeling of ancient kings and mythical heroes. With Superman, Jerry and Joe created the hero they always wanted to be, someone who was not just powerful, handsome, and brave, but also who stood up for the powerless, someone who would have fought for people like Jerry's father. The final touch was the S on his chest, a signature and unmistakable visual element that defined him as the comic's first great superhero. They had finally created their Superman. Now they needed to see if he could fly. By the late 1930s, Jerry and Joe were out of high school, broke, and living with their parents. Joe made money by collecting and selling old milk bottles back to grocers. They tried to sell their Superman comic, but faced one major problem. No one wanted it. Every comic publisher in America rejected The Last Son of Krypton. While comics were popular, superheroes weren't. Most comics featured detectives, monsters, and gangsters. Superpowered characters just weren't part of the popular imagination. After years of rejection, publishers at Detective Comics, which would become DC Comics, agreed to give Superman a home. They wouldn't make Superman a standalone comic. Instead, they included him in Action Comics #1, featuring several different stories and characters. DC paid Jerry and Joe $130 for their comic, and in a fateful decision, also bought the character rights. On April 18, 1938, the first Superman adventure hit the newsstands. Superman was a hit from the beginning. He was quickly given his own comic book, and every issue sold hundreds of thousands of copies. One major reason for Superman's success was that he was a champion for the underdog. In his first published issue, Superman took on corrupt politicians, a domestic abuser, and freed a wrongfully imprisoned woman from death row. Before he fought mega villains like Lex Luthor and Doomsday, he stood up for ordinary people against the real-world problems they faced. Superman even fought Hitler before the United States entered World War II, and he became a symbol of America's fight against tyranny. Clark Kent was also essential to Superman's success. In Superman, readers could see the man they wanted to be. In Kent, they could see themselves. That duality reflected both their dreams and reality in a way that made readers feel like Superman was one of them. While political and religious groups still worked to ban the comics, the immense popularity of The Last Son of Krypton meant that they were too deeply ingrained into the culture to be stopped. Superman's legacy was even more powerful than his super strength. His success inspired a rush for publishers to create the next great comic book hero. In the years following Superman's release, he inspired the creation of dozens of new characters, including Batman, Captain America, Wonder Woman, and The Flash. Superman's success led directly to the modern hero pantheon, which has defined comics and culture for almost a century. And he didn't just pave the way for superheroes, he showed that they didn't have to stay confined to the flimsy pages of the comic book. As popular media evolved, Superman was always the first character to show that audiences wanted their favorite heroes to be more than static drawings on a box. In the 1940s and 50s, the Superman radio show was extremely popular in America. As television dominated in the 60s, George Reeves starred in the first superhero TV show, The Adventures of Superman. The Man of Steel made the ultimate breakthrough in 1978 when Superman the movie became the first big-budget, blockbuster superhero film, paving the way for a generation of comic book movies. Superman had to soar before the Avengers could assemble. But Superman's impact was bigger than the box office. He became central to America's new national identity. He embodied the values of truth, justice, and the American way, and encouraged people to see those qualities in themselves. Today, superheroes dominate everything, from comics to movies to toys to TV shows. They're central not just to our narratives, but to our values. And none of it would have been possible if it hadn't been for the fevered imaginations of two teenagers who felt rejected by the world and wanted to feel like there was a place where they could belong.